You're listening to Fat So, supported by Suno India.
Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer. You might encounter strong language. Whoopsie! We also want to be clear that the things we say are our opinions and should no way be taken as medical, health, or dietary advice. We also are aware that we have certain privileged experiences and therefore we are not able to be representative and we don't even aim to be representative of all the things that people have lived and felt that we have not. Special trigger warning for this episode. It does mention sexual assault, and if you feel like you can't handle it, then by all means give it a miss. I'm fat and I eat emotionally. So,
I'm fat, and I've tried to hide how unhappy fat makes me for years. So,
I'm fat and I refuse to let it make me unhappy. So,
I'm fat, and I used to call myself a defective piece. So,
I'm fat and I needed and I still need therapy to help me keep that unhappiness at bay. So,
I'm fat, and lately, I think it's possibly the best thing that ever happened to me. So,
whoa, talk about like raising the bar, eh? Oh.
woohoo!
Welcome to Fatso, the podcast where we talk about the joys and sorrows of being fat women in India, heavy on the joy. I'm Ameya.
And I'm Pallavi. And today, we're going to be talking about how the experience of being a fat woman and having to navigate life affects our mental health. Also, and equally important for our listeners out there, is the question, will Ameya go back to doing her rant? Will she, won't she, will she, won't she? So Ameya, what's it gonna be?
Okay, it's time. I know I had a whole year of Pallavi love surrounding me and all of that, but there's only so much that I can change. I'm an old lady. So, it's been too long. The most. And I do honestly, truly, really mean the single most fucked up thing about fat phobia is just how much it fucks up people's heads. Trust me, that is literally the worst thing ever. Because it doesn't matter if you're thin or you're fat. You live in mortal terror of falling into that terrifying bracket called fat, right? All of us are like, it's the worst nightmare. Fat is so effectively demonized by fat phobic society that we will do anything, literally starve ourselves, literally have stomach acid eat our esophagus, so long as we can avoid being fat. Right? How fucked up is that? And then when you think about the people who are actually fat, okay? Whatever yardstick you want to use. I say 18 plus, as Lizzo calls it, my 18 plus fatso. Well, I don't think she uses the word fatso. But it starts with social rejection. Before you can even recognize what fatness is or understand any of these things, you see fat bodies anywhere, they're always ridiculed, pointed at as a bad thing. Your mother or your father will watch you and be like, oh, you shouldn't eat that, you'll get fat, beta, itna ice cream mat khao. You know, they'll be like, oh, look at that fat kid, and so on and so forth. Right there it starts. As you get older, of course, it becomes more deliberate, more obvious, more literal, and you spend all your time and energy terrified of being fat. So you are comprehensively, if you are fat, in this system, you are comprehensively rejected by everybody and everything. Right? You don't fit in the chairs, you can't buy the clothes, everybody points and laughs when they look at you. You just want to disappear, but you can't disappear. Like your desk at school will like sit on your stomach instead of going flat. You can never get picked for games. If you like a boy or a girl, it becomes the target of their extreme humiliation. People play tricks on you, pretending that they like you just to mock you and be like, ew, who would go with you as a fatty? Right? That kind of stuff. It happens. So, all the way you're told you're unworthy. It doesn't matter how smart you are, it's not enough because you're fat. You won't get a good job because you'd rather take a thin person. You will even at the age of 35, after all the years of therapy and growth and all of these things, turn around and tell yourself that, look, I'm 35 years old and I'm single. There are way more single women who have my traits, intelligence, humor, blah blah blah, all of these things. Then there are single men. So if you had two identical women with all the same characteristics and one was fat and one was not, why would you pick the fat one? This is me, by the way, as little as 3 years ago. This is what I believed. And that's just it. That is how much, despite all the therapy and all the things that I had in there. So you always believe you're unworthy. And when you believe you're unworthy for one thing, it sort of leaks into the rest of your life. So you're like, I'm unworthy of everything, I'm unworthy of everything. And not only do you get rejected all the time, but you reach a point where you are too scared to ask for anything because you're so scared you will get rejected. You'll reach a point where if you call your friend in the middle of the night because you're really depressed and suicidal and they don't answer the phone because they were in the bathroom, because they were asleep, you will interpret that it means that they think you are not worthy of their time and attention, even if it's not true. And my point is, it doesn't matter how supportive and how loving an environment you're in anyway. This is what happens. This is how your mental health is completely fucked. You have this deeply entrenched belief that you're not worthy of anything. And what does that do then? It makes you submit to the most exploitative and abusive relationships possible. You're an easy target for anybody who wants to manipulate and abuse you. Parents will be like, nobody will marry you because you're fat. Colleagues will be like, oh, you're dumb and lazy because you're fat. Anybody who's even 5 seconds of nice to you. Like I used to say, people would be like, what's your type in guys? I'm like, guys who are nice to me. And it sounds a little like stupid, but it's literally true. If a guy was nice to me, I would be in love with him in 5 minutes flat. Because it was so alien to me that this could even be possible, right? And then what happens when you do get sucked into an abusive place like that? This person has all the power over you. And all of society has basically set you up as a patsy for the first exploitative person they find. There will be bosses who will be like, you're so fat, you're useless, but it's okay, I'll be kind to you and keep you. Whatever it is, it's horrifying. And then it gets worse. You go into suicidal ideation. You want to disappear so badly because your body takes up too much place and it's so vilified and so hated by everyone and everything. You think you are so unworthy. You're like, I'm a waste of life. I should die. And then you kill yourself. Well, hopefully you don't. But the point is, it is not a small thing. The mental health consequences of fat phobia are unbelievable. And this is on Fatsos. They also have similar consequences on non-fat people because they live in terror of becoming fat. Man, okay. Clearly, this is what happens when I suppress the rants for too long.
No, brilliant rant. Well done, Mia. Thank you for being back. And I really feel you. I really feel you, love. I mean, it makes me squirm. I don't know whether squirm is the right thing, but it's so agonizing because it's such a shared experience. So yeah. And the timing of the fact that we're recording this episode now is quite interesting to me. Because lately, I've really been thinking about this whole intersection of being fat and mental health. And there's a lot of stuff that I've been unpacking recently. And what triggered my thought process was, when we were doing the last episode and I attempted a rant, failed miserably, but anyways, and you said good attempt, but too much laughing. And later I was like, but the rage is real. And the rage is real. But what I also realized was I have spent so much time in my life trying to keep it as hidden as possible in order to be the nice girl, air quotes, people. And okay, that's my upbringing, my personality, combination of all of that. May not be somebody else's experience, but what is, I think, everybody's experience is the need to compensate for being the fat reject that society wants to squash. Now, whether you compensate that by trying to be smaller, trying to be larger, trying to be louder, whatever it is, we're all trying to compensate for that, And to me, that takes you away from your true self, which is what is at your core? What are the gifts that you have? And also, what are the real demons that you have? Not those projected on you by the rest of the world, right? And for me, it just split my personality, right? And it took years of working on myself, all kinds of tools, techniques, books, seminars, and now therapy. And it's only very recently, a few years as compared to, the 35 other years of my life, It's only recently that I'm at a point where I can say that, okay, I look into the mirror and I see love reflected back at myself. And that's wonderful for me. But then I also had privilege. I also have education. I also have that exposure, the space to do what I've done. So what about, all of those that are still stuck in this quagmire? And also, how many more people are being born and have to go through the same, stuff just because they're different in some way? And it's just such an awful, awful experience that we all have as a collective. And society just isn't changing quick enough. So, yeah, I think, and honestly, I think this is a pandemic. I mean, this too is a pandemic, which is out there, but of a completely different nature. And we don't see it, right? We don't see it like actual bruises. We don't see like an actual person, in the hospital. So we don't even get it. And God only knows how many people it infects and kills, like as you were saying. So,
I am depressed and I have anxiety. Just FYI, just, to put it out there. This is not something I hide about myself at all, but just to say it very clearly on the podcast right now, I am depressed and I have anxiety. Now, the reason I say I am depressed, even though I may not right now be in a depressive episode, is that once it's there, it's there. It's not going to go away forever. There's no like magic cure like that. And people have historically always told me, yeah, you know what your problem is? You think too much. And I look at them and I say, would you go to someone with cancer and say, yeah, you know what your problem is? You grow too much? Would you say that? If you saw somebody limping, would you tell them to go home and take the day off? Or would you tell them to just, oh, come on, just snap out of it? Because this is the thing. A person who is low energy, who is manic, who is depressed, who is down, whatever expression they have of their mental illness, is always told to snap out of it. Like it's a non-thing, And this is a really big issue. So for me, my depression really, really hit. I had like one episode in 2006, early 2006. I don't know what triggered it even now. I did go to therapy for like a month and then she said I was fine and then I went. And it had partly to do with the crisis of what I wanted my life to be and the fact that it wasn't becoming that. Because I had a picture in my head of what my life was supposed to be. And that picture is finally now after 15 years of life and therapy, I sort of ripped it up and thrown it away. But the pieces are still in the waste paper basket and I still know that they're there. So it's not like I never do that. And so to me, it became a situation where I thought that I could control the world. And I could make things happen because I could control the world. But I couldn't control the world because guess what? You can't. And I couldn't make all the outcomes happen. I did all the right things, but I didn't get all the outcomes I deserved. Was it because I didn't work hard enough? Was it because I was fat? Was it because I was, I had that thing, I can't remember what it's called. I should look it up. But that thing where you think you're better than you actually are, right? It was none of those things. It is just a fact of life. We're all told that you can do whatever you want to do, be whoever you want to be, but actually you can't, and the real world doesn't work like that. And nobody prepares us for that. Nobody prepares us to fail, to recover from failure. But before I rush off into another ranty tangent, let me return to mental health and my personal experience of it. So after that, in 2012, I was working at Penguin. I was doing really well. I was suddenly living with a total stranger who was pretty weird. I had this new job and I was struggling to find this new life and I just was in tears all the time. I was miserable. But I also could not possibly show the world that misery, right? And I would drag myself out of bed and I would go to work and I would sit at the computer and I would be texting with my best friend Shamin in Hong Kong and tears would be running down my face and I would mop them up. I would go to the bathroom and lock myself in 10 times a day to cry. And then I would pick myself up and I would go home and I would collapse. I was exhausted. I didn't have the energy to think about anything or do anything. I was a total wreck. And I knew something was wrong. But I used to drink like crazy and I used to hook up with guys because it was some kind of intimacy and some kind of thing that worked. Eventually, one of those guys I hooked up with turned out to be really helpful and he kind of was my life raft for at least a year and a half. And I made it out of the other side with a lot of it came from his love and his help and his I will come from 25 kilometers away in the middle of the night and hold you if you need me to, which was a big deal. Especially because a lot of my triggers were related to boys and of course continue to be related to boys. So I ended up going to therapy then. Finally, I managed to get myself together enough to go to therapy. after a year of therapy with this wonderful woman, one day I came out of a meeting at work, and one of my colleagues was like, "Wow, you're in a great mood today." And I just looked at her and I said, "No, this is me normal. You just only ever seen depressed me." And she was a bit shocked. But I also realized how lucky I am. How lucky I am that my parents could afford to pay for therapy, and that they did pay for therapy, because believe me, on a publishing salary, I couldn't afford it. And how lucky I am that my boss was so kind and understanding. I mean, Chiki was a godsend. She was like, "What do you need?" I remember once I had this really dramatic moment when I was like, "I can't do this." She says, "Okay, go home for 6 months. Do you need a sabbatical? Take a sabbatical. Do you want to work from Hyderabad for 6 months? Do it. What do you need? I will do it for you." And I can't tell you how it felt to have that kind of support. And I realized that very few people actually do. Despite therapy, despite years of all of this, despite having all the tools I have to manage and deal with my depression today, I still miss it when it happens. I was depressed as all hell in 2017, 16 and 17 when I was in B school. It's only later when I came back that I realized it. Again in 2018, I was severely depressed. It came from the same thing, feeling like I was a failure, right? But I never realized it. For me, this is now is the first time in my life when I have actually able to recognize my patterns and say, "Oh, I'm depressed," and then try and figure out what the trigger is. Where is this pain coming from? And how can I deal with it? So and fatness didn't help at all, because all of those negative feelings, those feelings of out of control, I don't want to fail, like trying to lose weight when you are an emotional eater and are mentally ill and are exhausted is impossible. You don't have the time to sit and think about your diet and eat in a particular kind of way. You don't have the energy or the time or the motivation to exercise. Willpower works when your stomach is full and your heart is high. So, and then of course I was failing again at losing weight, and it just became like a lovely, lovely vicious cycle. Fat phobia is always waiting to trip me up. Despite all the awareness and all the training and all the skills I have, it's just lurking behind the door like a malevolent cat who's coming to run out just as you walk past carrying a pile of dishes so that you trip and fall on your face. But that is my experience of it, and that's why I want to share it, because, I don't know how many people even know when they have these problems, because we don't talk about this stuff at all.
Yeah, my goodness, Maya. And, we've never spoken about this. So strange, right?
I know, right?
We're so close, and yet we, don't talk about these things. And, I think just that thing that both of us have said, "Oh, look, I'm so lucky, that this has happened and we've been able to turn it around." And damn straight, we are lucky, but it should not be a matter of luck.
Yeah. I mean,
human beings, and we're living on this planet. We have a lived experience. We have these emotions. It should not be a matter of luck. And that's why I think we're doing this podcast. And that's why we're having these conversations, because God damn it, there has to be some change.
Yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. So, I mean, I understand that in India, look at the other healthcare issues we have and all of that. I mean, and I get it. But my God in heaven, can we at least accept that it's a legitimate problem and not stigmatize people for it? And back to fatness. Can we please understand how fat phobia triggers and causes so much mental illness? Because that constant feeling of unworthiness, of rejection, of shame, rejection, unworthiness, that is a very potent combination that can fucking destroy you.
Absolutely. And it starts so young, because for me, all the shaming and rejection was at home, right?
Yeah.
And it was when I was as young as maybe 3 or 4. I remember it when I was 5. And it was all hidden in this, care and love and concern. And the message I got repeatedly was that how others see me is important. And that if they see me in a positive light, only then can I be loved. Only then can I survive. And for a young child, love is survival. There's just no two ways about it.
Yep.
Right? And I mean, and I think one of the reasons why it is upsetting me even today is, in this situation where I've come back to live with my mom. I mean, she claims blissful ignorance of it. But I know how many times I was literally beaten, like physically beaten, right? And I'm not talking about smacked and spanked, and because then I would have used those words. I'm talking about being beaten. Because I did, or I ate something, or I said something in front of this auntie or that uncle, or so-and-so's auntie's kid who's gone and tattled to that auntie and uncle, and I've been beaten about it, And it was all related to either eating something or, doing something that was, that showed my fat in some way.
Yeah.
And, and there were also things like, I would say something and the other person would claim something else about food or something like that. But then I was the fat girl who was never believed because I must be cheating, lying, etc., etc. Right? And they were, so, that thin privilege really made itself known to me, like as young as that. But of course, I didn't have the words for it, right? Mm-hmm. For me, it was just that I have to be a certain way for the world to treat me okay, so that my mother won't beat the shit out of me. And then, I've just had a conversation with her 2 days ago and she says, yeah, but I also hugged you and I kissed you and soothed you and all of that. And I was like, no, but that was post the event. And that was actually more damaging because you see the contrast was so stark that it deepened my belief that I need to fit in, I need to be a certain way so that I wouldn't be brutalized. And I would experience the soothing more than the brutalizing.
Yeah.
And can you imagine what that did to my personality, right? And then there's school. Right? And I was a snob. I wanted to be friends with all the cool kids and the attractive kids. But that was me. And there was no question of them being friends with me.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, I remember when I was, I think, in the first or the second grade, there were these two girls who were the cool, pretty girls whom I wanted to be friends with. And they actually ganged up and did something that made me get punished by the teacher. So, it was like, it was such betrayal. Somehow, however, at some point, bullying in school didn't bother me so much because I was the smart kid. I was the hardworking kid. Yeah. I was the topper. I was the one who did well in all the extracurricular activities. And I knew I was good. I was the person whom, when the teachers couldn't find anybody else, they'd catch hold of me and say, listen, you have to go do this math symposium tomorrow. That somebody who's 2 years elder to you would have actually written the script, but they're sick. And I would learn it up at night, go present it, talk through my hat, answer questions, and we'd get the second prize. Like, that was unbelievable, right? But I was smart enough to be able to do that, So somewhere the bullying didn't bother me. It started, but I was alone. I knew I was alone. I knew I didn't have friends, So it started affecting me when I was 14. I lost a whole lot of weight. And I did really well at school in that year. And just that time, we shifted to India. So when I came to India, I was introduced as this really smart kid and I was slimmer. So I made a lot of friends very quickly. But then I started gaining weight. And the moment I started gaining weight, I panicked that I would lose all my friends. And so I damped down my smartness because I also realized that people don't like very smart girls, like, beyond a point, there's very little tolerance for that. So, it's sort of like just dampened that drive. And I remember from wanting to be the first all the time, I was like, take a top 3 mein paunch jaungi. If I'm in the top 3, I'm fine because at least then I won't get, this thing at home that, you weren't first. Because that too was a thing. I had to be first all the time.
Yep.
I think the real hard, the thing that destroyed me in this area was when so I didn't get through the MBA interviews in the first round. I got through on the waiting list. Mm-hmm. And the person who was training me to get through said, well, they probably rejected you because you are fat. And, really that was the last bastion, this ability to do well because that I had agency in that, I could work hard and I would get it. It sort of got infected. And I completely gave up, Maya. When I got to B school, I was in a space where I don't care. I don't want to do well. I just want to survive. I want to have a few friends. And, I don't need to do the best. I don't need to be up there. And it killed my drive. It killed my motivation for a long time. And I made choices based on that. And, I know that I decided not to do marketing, not to do strategy, not to do a whole lot of other things, courses, finance, etc. that were available because it didn't come naturally to me. I would have had to work much harder to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it wasn't worth it. And HR and people and all of that came naturally to me and I chose it. I'm not saying it was a bad choice. I'm happy now knowing who I am. But the thing is, the intersection of fat and the intersection of being rejected about it and the intersection of that being an all-pervasive thing really, really damaged this part of me that was just also, I do have a part of me which is like, I like to be nice and I like to be liked, but I'm also very badass and ambitious, and it just killed that part of me. Or okay, let's say it went into coma because I'm hoping to revive it now. So, basically, I stopped seeing my enormous talent, and I use air quotes, and I use the word enormous very intentionally, because I do have a lot of talent. And instead, I just started pretending to be the person I thought I should be, non-confrontational, always smiling, this easy, flirtatious manner, sincere, hardworking, moldable, adjusting. And, as I said, that may be a part of me because I wouldn't have chosen it if it wasn't a little bit there in me, but it isn't all of me.
Yeah.
So, and all those decisions I made about career or career moves or, fighting for my promotions or fighting for my increments or then getting married to the person I got married, willing to live with his parents, then they're also trying to be loved, trying to, again, air quotes, not just fit in, but actually blend in. And the reason I say blend as a separate word is because blending is about letting go of a little bit of yourself so that you become a little bit of the other, right? And in the process, I just lost myself so completely. And it took some pretty rude shocks to get me to snap out of it and start looking for myself again. But before I get to those rude shocks, I think let's talk about your healing journey.
Before I go into healing also, it's very true though, because I remember when I went to a different school for 11th and 12th and I was wearing salwar kameez and the sheer mockery I got because I was a fat girl. And in the first day in class, I answered a question and answered it right because, hi, I'm smart, fuck you. And these three boys hunted me down in the corridor later and told me, who the hell do you think you are? Answering questions in class. And I was like, eh? They're like, you're a new girl. And I was like, eh? Thankfully, I had a ridiculous amount of support at home, right? So this was not something that affected me in any serious way. But I still remember it. And I do remember that I always felt worthless in that school because girls were supposed to be pretty, not smart. And if you were smart, the least you could do was at least be easy on the eyes. And it was like an implicit thing that was there and part of that school. And part of life, let's be honest, because so many of us try to tone ourselves down, stay in the middle of the pack because you don't want to draw attention. If I was a fat girl and I was doing better than these boys, they picked on me extra. Because they're like, and they can use that very obvious weapon right there, right? Your body can be used against you. So you do try to sort of tone everything down, yourself and everything. But yes, back to healing. Now, healing for me is, like I said in my previous speech, it's mostly been therapy. It started with CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And now I'm working on... I'm doing depth work with Judy, Jungian depth work. And the things I've really learned that helped me heal were learning to ask for help. My God. Learning to ask for help. Learning to stand up and say to people that, no, don't say that to me. That's not helpful. I wrote a blog post about this as well, right? If you love me, don't dismiss me. But it just boils down to the fact that if you love me and I tell you I'm fat, I'm sad, don't turn around and say, no, it's fine. Just go for a walk every day. That's not helpful. So, more than anything else for me, healing has literally involved going to therapy and then talking about these things. Like, I'm a person who, I'm sure this comes as a rude shock to everybody. I'm a person who has strong opinions and likes to sort of convince people and argue and engage with people intellectually and speak and communicate verbally, right? I know, shocking. I know. I was shocked too. But yeah, so it's having these conversations with people has been a way for me to assert that, has been a way for me to let the small part of myself that does cling to the belief that I'm not less because I'm fat. I mean, it's had more chance of voice and stuff like that and things to talk about, so that giving that little part of me a voice has actually helped it to convince me in all my discussions with people, in rationally taking down their arguments or their positions or engaging with them. I've learned so much about myself, and I've learned so much about how to heal from this.
Just a trigger warning for this next part, sexual assault, and you might want to skip ahead 5 or 10 minutes so you miss this. So, I spoke about the root shocks that led to my healing. And apart from the trigger alert, what I'd also like to say is that this is I want to be very clear, this is my personal experience of healing. I do not think or wish, or definitely do not wish it upon anybody, that a shock such as the one I had is used as a doorway to healing. I mean, I think you understand what I mean. I don't want this for anybody. But for me, yes, it was a doorway to healing, and that's why I'm sharing it here this way. So the first root shock was in 2004. And this was when I was living with my in-laws and my husband. And one day while cooking, a pressure cooker burst in my face and burnt half of my face. I was in the kitchen, and my husband, rushed to help me, support me, etc. He really took care of me. But the rest of the household basically said I'd done drama in order to avoid housework. And that just really, brought it home that I don't need to live here pleasing other people,
Yeah.
It really, so that was step number 1 of my deciding that I need to go back and find myself. Yeah, that I need to look for myself and figure out who I really am. The second episode is a little more horrifying, I guess. It was in 2006. My husband and I were living by ourselves by that time, but there was so much that had happened by then, and I was just really lonely and depressed and not knowing that I was depressed, and I made some bad choices. And as a result, I was raped. Now, rape isn't necessarily like it's depicted, okay? In fact, I think if I were to go to the police with it, or at that time I felt even if I had to tell my husband or my parents about it, they'd say it's your fault and, it doesn't fit the definition, right? And it's also the reason why I haven't spoken about it, why I didn't speak about it to anybody for almost 10 years after it happened, because I myself did not see it as rape, you see? The reason why I share it now is in context of how mental health is so important, because it's only when I understood the language of mental health, when I understood about depression, how that impacts our choices, how that makes us, see love where there is none, how that, about when I understood the language to express manipulation, gaslighting, when I understood what real consent means, it's only then that I understood that I was violated and that my feelings were valid. You see, it was someone I knew, helped by a friend. It was couched in threat, manipulation, blackmail. It went on over months before, the final act happened. And right at the end, even though I really resisted, right at the end, I sort of gave up the fight. Because I knew nobody would support me. Or at least I thought nobody would support me. And I just didn't want to get torn or physically damaged and then have to deal with the aftermath of that, of hospitals or whatever else would happen. And so I gave in. The thing is that that's what the perpetrator used to shame me. Because it was then like, see, you enjoyed it. Why did you do so much drama? Again, why did you do so much drama? After all, you enjoyed it. And something that I haven't even told you, and I think I'm saying it for the first time in my life, is that it almost happened the second time around. Another friend, same situation. And when I realized to my horror that I'm going to be in the same situation, I don't know what snapped in me. Something snapped in me and gave me this idea. And I remember saying to him that, oh, your dick is a little weird. My husband's look so much nicer. And I don't know how it helped me, because it may have led to a different form of abuse or beating or whatever else. It was an abusive situation, And I hit his ego, but he actually lost his erection and let me go.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, but, it was really... But, I may heal from it. And I know I have, because I don't think of it in the same way and I don't feel bad and I'm speaking about it and it's, there are no emotional triggers for me now. But I'm never going to forget it. Never going to be rid of the memory, And it really did lead to my second realization, my second moment of truth, because I remember writing in my journal after this, Pallavi, accept that you are alone. Accept this, that you are alone. And so here, there are two things you're going to do from now on. One, you're going to live for yourself, not your husband, not your parents, not your friends, not anybody else, just for yourself. And second, nobody else can make you happy. That's a myth. That's a lie. So find yourself, find what you love, find what makes you happy. Those were very strict rules. And I still live by those rules, but I'm beginning to unpack and realize that I don't need to be so strict about them. But I have lived 14, 15 years of my life just with this absolute conviction that I'm alone and no one can make me happy.
I do want to say one thing though. Because, this is how a lot of the things that drive me nuts. Society is a dick, the way we approach things, victim blaming, blah, blah, blah. Just the very fact that even now you still say I was raped. No, he raped you. You were not violated. He violated you. The way we even talk about sexual assault, we talk about it as if there is some non-existent creature that is enacting it upon a woman's body. Therefore, the only subject in this equation is the woman. When in actual fact, it's entirely the other way around. Anyway, I have many things to say to you that we can talk about off the podcast. I wish I could go back in time and not have this happen to you. But...
Ameya, thank you for what you just said. Because when you said that, and when I said it in my own head, he raped me, he violated me, I'm feeling a sense of release because that's the truth. It's on him.
Yes.
It wasn't about me. It had nothing to do with me.
Yes.
Okay, so I finished talking about sexual assault. As I was saying, I am in a different place now. But I do wonder whether if I had had a healthy sense of self at that time, I may not have experienced it at all, And the thing is that whatever amount of work you do on yourself, you can only be repaired, right? You can never be unbroken, okay? And you can be stronger and more sorted and more able to take on the world, but you will never be untouched by that incident, by those incidents, by those words. And I feel like I know now, my experience is that I'm genuinely feeling more nourished, and there are people who feel loved and encouraged and appreciate their own uniqueness. And and even me, when I feel it now, I'm just able to discern better. I'm able to back myself up, and it's parents, it's other influences in people's lives. It's some of it, the mental makeup of the person themselves. I'm sure there's no formula to this, But I think what's key is the need for everyone to feel nourished. So then whether they're fat or they're thin or they're any sort of outlier, they can embrace their uniqueness and they have a toolkit. They have a toolkit with which to deal with the world. And, it's so important to have dialogue, to have research, to have therapists, to have communities, platforms, and just in the same way as fat not being demonized, this too needs to stop being demonized, so that people have access to that blanket of safety or that cocoon that holds you and keeps you together. And I formed my own, I've worked on it and I formed my own. So I know it's possible, but it needs to be possible. It needs to be a part of society. It needs to be something that also is given, to each one of us. Just like fat acceptance.
Yeah, without doubt. And it's also so important to understand the mental health consequences of fat phobia once again, because a lot of this is if you start off already thinking of yourself as less than human, how do you begin to reject all this other shit that's put on you by the world? And the thing is, we all have demons, of course. Demons, our good friends, the demons. I think that now my demons have once again, in this case, are quite external. It worries me a lot, so much, how little we care about or acknowledge mental illness in general. How little we're willing to accept the mental illness consequences of the way we treat fat people in the name of their physical health. And all of this is exacerbated by the fact that they're already told so much that they're defective. Right? Everybody tells you you're useless, you don't fit anywhere, you don't belong anywhere, you try so hard to erase yourself from existence. And people tell you that you are less human, but if you lose weight, you'll become more human. And these people are telling you this shit. And imagine what it does to your head. I mean, it's insane. So, as it is, you have to overcome fat stigma to breathe.
Yeah.
And then you have to overcome mental health stigma to get help for your mental illness that is triggered by the fat stigma placed on you by fucked up society. And before I go into another rant, back to your demons, Pallavi.
I think for me, my biggest demon is I'm afraid of being afraid. I've battled so hard, I've conquered so much that I am so worried that someday I may lose this sense of self and agency. And I think it makes me obsessed about working on myself, because if you ask Swati, she'll roll her eyes and say, oh my God, and
she definitely has a problem, guys. But I guess it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, but I think thanks to Judy, thanks to the therapy, I'm also learning how to celebrate my wins and say, well done, girl.
Yes.
You've come a long way. Pat yourself on the back. You still have stuff to work on. That's perfectly all right. But look at how far you've come. Well done, baby. And that's what I'm spending time doing now.
Yeah, like you've fallen into the same pattern. Yes, you have. But guess what? The pattern didn't destroy you. You recognized the pattern and you stepped away from it. Maybe next time you'll break it.
So I think just a reflection. We need to take care of ourselves, but we also need to do what we can to take care of other people.
Yes.
Now that we're aware. And when we say we're lucky and we're privileged, we do need to do that. And I think it's a very small tweak. It's just about asking yourself, what would it take to be 5% kinder to myself today? And similarly, what would it take to be 5% kinder to another person today? And I do say kinder to myself first and another person second, because sometimes kindness to another person is saying, okay, I'm not going to deal with this, or I will call this out in you, or, I don't think this is required in my life. But it's important to understand what kindness looks like and make that intention to be kind.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Very true. If we could all just try to be kinder to ourselves, it would be really helpful. I mean, I like to say the whole world is waiting to shit on you. Don't shit on yourself. Right? Mm-hmm. And in the same vein, put on your own oxygen mask before you help somebody else. Because when you are in a place where you are not hating yourself and you're being kind to yourself, you will find that you have a reservoir of the milk of human kindness, as PG Woodhouse likes to call it, that you can then distribute to other people. Okay, this episode has gone on super long. I'm going to have fun editing it. But thank you all for listening, as always. And as you know, you can find us at Fatso Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and gmail.com. Our music was made by Anant, our logo by Yash, our photos taken by Suraj Ajita Kumar. We recorded in 2 undisclosed locations in the NCR, and I, Ameya, will edit as always.